I would like to formally introduce myself. I'm Brianna Good. I'm the Farm to School Coordinator at the Indiana Department of Health. I work within the Division of Nutrition and Physical Activity and help lead and support the Indiana Grown for Schools network. I'm so excited to see so many of you here for today's webinar on cultivating success, which is a blueprint for a thriving farm to school program. This session is brought to you by the Indiana Grown for Schools network, where we really support the connection between schools, farmers, and community partners to create a strong, sustainable farm to school movement across Indiana. So whether you're just getting started or you're looking to strengthen or grow farm to school efforts in your school, in your community, in your home, today's webinar will walk through some key components and proven strategies to really help boost your farm to school program for sustainability. So we invite you to engage through the chat. You can ask questions through the Q&A and really have an opportunity to connect and network with others, as well as tap into the knowledge that Karen's bringing with her today. So as I mentioned, Karen Peterson is our presenter today, and she is the Executive Director of the Northeast Indiana Local Food Network. She is a passionate leader in local food systems, working to build vibrant community-connected networks that really support farmers, schools, and communities all together. So through her work with Northeast Indiana Local Food Network, she has helped bring farm-to-school initiatives to life by fostering relationships and partnerships, increasing local food access, and supporting regional food system development. So she brings a wealth of experience and insight, and we're so grateful to have her with us. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Karen. And please feel free to, as I mentioned, use the chat for discussion and feel free to put any questions that you may have in our Q&A.
Thanks so much, Brianna. So happy to be here with everybody today. I'm excited to be able to talk to you about some of the things that excite me, make me passionate about the work that we do. Some of those things, kids, food, schools, and planning, which is actually one of the things we're going to spend a lot of time and talking about today. All of those are things that are important and will help us as we begin to develop thriving farm to school programs. So like Brenda said, my name is Karen Peterson. I'm the Executive Director of the Northeast Indiana Local Food Network. Some of the things we're going to talk about today, how we're going to build a blueprint for success. Things we're going to be touching on are important aspects like planning, partnering, problem solving, how to improve your impact. It's all about creating something that truly lasts, right? Sustainability, like Brianna mentioned. So whether that's sustainability and lasting and a difference for the kids that we serve, for the farmers that we partner with, or for our broader community. So just quick as it relates to farm to school, I think one of the things just personally that gets me really excited about this work is, we've all encountered kids that hate vegetables, but through the programs that we develop and that we lead, seeing them when they take that bite of their locally grown apple and see how it impacts their impression as it relates to fresh local food is really exciting and invigorating. So that's really just the power of the work that we do, and it's one of the reasons why I'm passionate about talking to folks and getting the word out about some of these important efforts. So with regard to the chat, I can't see everything, so Brianna's going to help me moderate, but I figured I could maybe just start out and tell you a little bit more about me. I am a parent of a child, two actually. I am a leader of a nonprofit. As an executive director, I am a small farmer, so I had to include a picture of me and my chickens. We do grow vegetables on our farm, but my chickens and my goats are kind of my heart, and love working with them. But one of the things that I wanted to point out to the group is our organization's mission is about creating a better food system for everyone in our region. So we serve 11 counties in the northeast corner of the state. I'm actually dialing in through to this webinar today from Fort Wayne, which is where I live and work, where our farm is. I'm actually at our Allen County Public Library here locally, watching the kids go with the summer programs. It's like it's really bringing the whole farm to school to life with some of the interaction I've been able to have here today. So one of the things that brought me to the opportunity to have this webinar and to talk about planning and food systems in farm to school is a fellowship that I completed. So I worked with some folks from Northwest Indiana Food Council who hosted a 6-month-long farm to school fellowship, which I was a part of. And I'm on the cusp of being a graduate of that program. And I say that because I want the folks on the phone to know that I, like you, am learning too as we go through this process. I'm relatively new to food system work, only within the last couple of years. My background is largely corporate and, like I said, some small farming. But I feel like my professional experience leans itself a lot more towards planning and project management. So I thought, okay, here's an opportunity. Let's take some of that skill set, present it as it relates to farm to school, and hopefully provide some feedback for you all in sort of the work that you do for your programs. So while I said I'm not an expert, I can provide guidance and support. I think one of the things that I'm hoping to get from this presentation is some collaboration through all of you. If I can help reinvigorate or give you some structure to some of the work you're trying to do, I think that that can be very, very valuable. So to get us started, I want to do just a little bit of interaction. I'd like to hear from you guys. Interested to know what is your number one farm to school challenge? So before we dive in a little bit deeper, I'd really like to hear from you all in what you are finding in the work that you're doing. What's the number one challenge that you have as it relates to your farm to school programs and the work that you're trying to do? So I'm going to give a few seconds to allow everybody to answer that in the chat. And if it's two, that's fine. Just when you think about the work that you're trying to do and the challenges that you're trying to overcome, I'm just interested to hear what other folks are finding in the work that they do. Knowing how to get started. Farmers, excellent. Getting started. Oh, good. You all are in many a situation like I am, so that's great. You came to the right place. So, procurement. Excellent. So, your responses align perfectly to sort of what it is that we often see. Some of the big farm to school challenges that we hear about are, finding local food, securing enough funding, building strong partnerships, having enough time or staff or resources to be able to complete the work that you need to do. There's transportation and logistical challenges, things like food safety. A lot of times people don't think about that. I know we've got food service workers here today and directors. You are intimately involved with what that means. So, those are some common challenges that we hear. Also, even just sometimes figuring out how to measure if what it is that you're doing, is it even working? Is it making an impact? Is it making a difference? So we're going to touch base on some of these challenges that you all just described and some of the things that we commonly hear in today's presentation. So thank you for your time and energy there. So today we're going to cover 4 key subjects that will help you tackle those challenges. First, we're going to talk about how to plan effectively. Planning is important, critical, can't be underscored enough. But we're going to talk through how to plan effectively in getting a robust farm to school project plan in place. So next, we're going to talk a little bit more about building strong partnerships, because this work thrives in collaboration. This is not a one-man show. So how you surround yourself with others like-minded, like-focused, similar values and goals will go a long way. So building strong partnerships is a lot about how to develop programs that thrive. Third, navigating common hurdles. Proactively tackling challenges and things as they come up. So some of the things we just talked about, and of course more. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about proving your impact. So how you can show value of the hard work that you do through both measurement and storytelling. Storytelling is key, and I'll probably talk a little bit more about this later too, but storytelling really helps advance collaboration. So if you get the opportunity to watch or listen to any separate sort of training as it relates to how to create and formulate a story, whether it's through social media posts or updates that you can give in your project. Those are really powerful statements. So I want to underscore sort of how storytelling can share and make the impact that we do very meaningful and resonate with folks. So housekeeping, like Brianna said, please use the Q&A function if you have any questions. Also, if you've got feedback or something that you're doing in your market, I'd love to see the chat be a place where you all can interact, sort of share your ideas and your thoughts, because this is a community, this is a fellowship. So as much as you can share with each other, I find that to be just as valuable in some of these trainings. This webinar is being recorded. It'll be shared later. I've also got some other resource documents that I'll be sharing. So you'll have plenty to go on. The last point I'll make as it relates to housekeeping is I've built this PowerPoint as to be a means of almost like a reference guide. So sometimes the slides are a little busier than I would typically like in a presentation, but for you all that have joined us today, it'll serve as good reference material sort of moving forward. So quick just sort of footnote on that. So all right, so let's dive into our first objective, which is planning. Why plan? It's important, like I said, can't underscore. It's the critical aspect of planning as it relates to any project that you're doing. But like anything else, it's almost like a roadmap, right? We wouldn't set off on a big road trip without knowing where you're going and how you're going to get there. So your plan for your farm to school program is exactly like that, and it takes those big ideas, which I would imagine many of us have sort of big aspirational ideas, which are really, really important. But to be able to stay focused and achieve some of those things, it's also very important to break those down into actionable steps. So if I want to get from A to Z, you got to pass by C, you got to, go through I, you got to go through all those letters in between. And sometimes that tracking is really important, because when we've got these large sort of transformational sort of goals, it can feel overwhelming in that you might not feel like you're making progress fast enough. But sometimes it's that jump from A to B that's going to give you enough resolve and enough resiliency to sort of keep on moving forward. So, a good plan gives clarity on your goals, on your activities, and who's responsible for what. It's also essential for securing buy-in from your school staff. I know we've got lots of school folks on the phone, administration, which is crucial. And it also helps you identify who you need to partner with and what you'll need from them. So some of the resources that we'll share after the call are some guidebooks, some planning, sort of in-depth rubrics, things like that I learned and received access to from my fellowship. Hi, Veronica. That I think can be really, really helpful and dive even more deeply into some of the sort of high-level stuff we're talking about today. So some of those guides and some of those bits of information will go a little bit further into emphasizing how planning will help you align your existing activities, whether it's within your school culture or your community priorities, how to leverage those as it relates to sort of your roadmap. So again, all of these things are really key as it relates to long-term sustainability. And as it relates to roadmaps, I mean, we've all been in situations, I'm sure, where you just try to wing it. You're just doing the best you can, low resources, low budget, trying to make some impact. And as we consider sort of the results of winging it, a lot of times that will result in things like confusion, wasted effort. There's been instances that I've, and partners that I've talked with about, school gardens, sometimes this will happen. There's this enormous push and sort of drive as it relates to getting a school garden off the ground, and lots of rallying, lots of work, lots of efforts. One of the things that often we'll miss is the long-term sort of plan on managing that school garden. How are things going to be tackled during the summer? And all of those things impact sort of the results. So, let's not wing it. Let's have a plan, and let's make sure that we take the opportunity to do some of this hard work, initial hard work up front, so that we have some better results down on the other side. So I'm sure many of you are aware of SMART goals. It's very corporate America education. It's something that is a very common term, but these SMART goals can absolutely be a tool for you as you begin to set your blueprint. So as you're looking to launch your farm to school program, leveraging tools like SMART goals, which you might already be familiar with, are very, very helpful. So this framework will help you take those sort of broader aspirational goals and make them concrete. So for example, what is your goal? Is it specific? What exactly do you hope to achieve? Is your goal measurable? How do you know when you've hit it? What are some of the milestones along the way that you can sort of check off to say that you're heading in the right direction? Is your goal even achievable? I think, like I said, aspirational goals are fantastic. Visionary goals are fantastic. But we don't want to set those goals so high that they become unachievable, which then set us back and sort of make us lose potential momentum, which is unfortunate. Are those goals relevant? Does it truly align with the overall mission of your organization, your school, your community partnership, your foundation? Does it meet the needs of your community? Consider those that you're impacting with. And is the strategy that you're putting in place really relevant for them? It's just a good level set. And then last, is it time bound? When do you expect to complete it? Now, one of the things that that I think is really, really important is sort of outlining these things as it relates to specific examples. So like, for example, here, by fall of 2025, Amherst Elementary is going to serve locally sourced apples twice a month for school lunch, increasing student consumption of apples by 15%. That's an example of a strong, measurable goal that gives you a clear target and then a pathway to sort of success. And, shout out to Amherst Elementary, which is where my kids went to school. But just a good example of how you can take a very basic and sort of achievable desired outcome and sort of make sure that you've got all of those particular items in place to be able to make sure, yes, it's specific, yes, it's measurable, yes, it's achievable, yes, it's relevant. And it does have sort of that time-bound sort of moniker as well. So I've seen through the work that I've done, whether it's in nonprofit world, through farm to school, or just through corporate work, the power of SMART goals is available firsthand. It's easy to say, oh, we want to increase, healthy eating, which is, I'm sure, many of our sort of long-term goals. But when we take that aspirational goal of increasing healthy eating and we turn it into sort of a SMART moniker, we can look at things like by spring, 50% of the students will taste a new vegetable from the garden at least once. Those types of examples of goals can make things much more easier to be able to plan the activities that you need to be able to achieve them, track the progress against the work that you're doing, and then celebrate, right, when you've hit that specific number. Those types of interactions really help sort of motivate the broader team. So I don't know if anybody's got any sort of specific goals that they're working on within their farm to school programs, but I would love to see you throw some of those into the chat so that we can share in that and try to see where we're aligned or where maybe somebody's got sort of a unique or positive idea that can be sort of shared by the team. So the second sort of component that I wanted to talk a little bit about today is building your timeline. So like I mentioned before, what that really means is taking those big goals and breaking them up into logical sort of phases. So like, for example, maybe we start with research, right? And then we look at things like outreach. Who should we engage in this particular project? Then we move into more, planning and implementation, then eventually evaluation. Like I mentioned before, you want to identify sort of those key milestones along the way, such as, we want to have our, first meeting. We want to follow up with this garden club launch, by X date, and really be a little bit more prescriptive as it relates to the goals, so that then, when you've come to the end and when you want to be able to, serve that first meal, you'll be able to have those things sort of planned out along the way. But I think one of the things that's really, really important While planning and details will help us stay on track and give us sort of a blueprint, I think the thing that we can't forget either is that we really need to understand that there might be times where we need to be flexible. And we might need to react to what's happening, right? Um, Anytime you have a plan, there's always an opportunity for things to go off track, right? Detours, what have you. So I think it's important to note that your timeline is a guide. It's not rigid. It's not a contract. Real world things happen, so you need to be able to be ready to adapt. So, things that we often hear about in farm to school programs that come up unexpected. We've got crop shortages. We've got a late harvest. There's a funding delay. All of those things can and likely will happen. Um, and that's okay. But the key is because you have a plan and because you've got a timeline and a strategy, you'll be able to have provided some structure that'll also allow for flexibility for you to be able to navigate for the unexpected. So again, I want to maybe emphasize things like flexibility. One of the things that I know had happened recently was, there was a school locally that, well, not locally, but it was a colleague that I was working with. They were going to be getting a new kitchen equipment, like a bar, so that they could have a local produce on their salad bar. And so they were, waiting for the equipment. Everything was ready to go. Unfortunately, as sometimes happens, supply chain issues. Some of the equipment that they needed to be able to launch that and meet that goal was delayed. Not terribly long, few weeks, a month. It pushed back the timeline for them. And that was unexpected, unfortunate, but because they had a plan, they were able to take that time, not panic, more so upset than panic, but not panic, and take the extra time that they had to sort of refine some of their educational materials and do some taste tests with students, other things to sort of insert into the program to be able to keep some momentum while they were dealing with sort of that known delay. And in the end, it made the launch even stronger. So just things to think about. Like I said, flexibility is really, really important. Um, the other thing that is important to consider is things like task delegation and defining your team roles. So you might find that people wear many hats, and that's okay. But I wanted to outline some of the key sort of roles that we see in farm to school initiatives, and it's through some of these key roles that we can better identify sort of who does what. Right. So even if you're on a small team, it's important and helpful to think about these different functions as it relates to your farm to school team. So who is, working predominantly with procurement, who is working with the farmers, and who is managing the purchasing and the logistics as it relates to deliveries and timing and things like that. Who's your procurement lead? Who's the person that is taking lead on things like education, nutrition information? Who's developing the lessons plans or the garden activities, or whatever your program is? Who's sort of taking lead and managing the educational aspect? If you have a school garden, who's leading the effort as it relates to that school garden? One of the things that can't be underscored enough, unfortunately, especially in the climate that we're in right now, is funding. I sort of breeze through that when we start talking about challenges, but I can certainly appreciate that funding is likely a large challenge for all of us right now as it relates to seeing our programs not only grow, but thrive and be effective. So this might be something that you've managed to have to sort of switch gears on. Do you have somebody that's focused on making sure that you have the funds available to achieve your results? What do your funding streams look like? Who are you working with? Are you pursuing grants? That's a whole other aspect of this work that takes a lot of time and energy and a lot of planning. There's a whole separate sort of grants calendar and things like that you might want to be looking into if you or a member of your team is focused on fundraising. But can't underscore enough how important that is. The other things that we see often is things like food safety champions, communication liaison. Like I mentioned before, even if somebody is wearing multiple hats, it's really important to clearly think about these roles who's doing what, and who's achieving which objectives, because they're crucial for things like growth and clarity, and it prevents things from falling through the cracks. The other thing that I found, especially as it relates to working with larger, maybe multidisciplinary teams, people coming from different situations and organizations, is that most people, when involved in a group, they like a job. They want to know what they're responsible to do. So outlining those things clearly, communicating with them can make these broader projects much more realistic, and give everybody ownership and accountability as it relates to achieving their piece. And each small piece, when sort of captured together, is what will get us sort of over the line as it relates to getting the project done. So I don't want to minimize that at all. So again, making sure that those things are outlined is a critical part of making sure that everybody's delegated, working hard, and working together on sort of a common goal. Next, I want to talk a little bit about resource allocation. So when I talk about resources, it's a lot more than just money. Of course, yes, financial resources are important, like I mentioned before, and sometimes scarce. But it's also really important to think about the resource power within each of us, within the teams that you work within. So human power, your dedicated staff time, your enthusiastic volunteers, your active parent groups, and other community members. These are absolutely invaluable resources. I think that it's important as you look at identifying things like partners to work within. Identifying and leveraging people for their specialties is really, really important. Don't hesitate to ask for help. As it relates to human power, those might extend themselves to people even outside of your traditional farm to school team. So as it relates to the power of the human, think about it from that perspective as well. We also want to think about things like physical assets. So I know we've got a lot of school folks on the phone. Do you have a school garden space? What does that look like? What is your existing infrastructure from a kitchen perspective look like? Do you have classroom facilities that can be used? Are there local community centers or food hubs that you could partner with to be able to deliver programming? And also, let's not forget about things like information and expertise. So there's a tremendous knowledge base within the teams that we work in. The knowledge of the local farmers, the existing farm to school programs that are maybe in neighboring or nearby counties or areas for yourself. These are definitely resources that can be tapped into. Other things that I think are important to acknowledge are some of the school nutrition policies. They can certainly be information and expertise that can help us moving forward. Community health data, there's all sorts of things. I guess the big takeaway here is that a clear and adaptable plan is your foundational roadmap to success. Even before you solidify all your partnerships, it helps set the stage for everything else. So again, understanding your resources and how they're allocated is an important part of developing your strategy. So weaving the web. Let's talk a little bit about our second objective here today, which is partnerships. So as I mentioned before, Farm to School truly thrives on collaboration. The web is a great analogy. Everyone is, connected and is supportive of each other. Oftentimes, it's all about sort of that shared vision and mutual benefits. And, we're going to talk a little bit about likely partners, sort of the folks that you would expect to see in farm to school efforts. But I think what I would challenge everybody to think about is who's your unlikely partner? And I've got some stories. We might not have time today, but on sort of unlikely partners as it relates to farm to school. So I guess I'll encourage anybody in the chat, if there's an unlikely partner that you've worked with that might help give some drive and some energy to the rest of us, that would be great. It's all about understanding, where those sort of shared values and those shared sort of objectives, you'd be surprised where those lie. right? Some of our most surprising partnerships have happened, whether it's dealing with people in the art world who all of a sudden got interested in a garden project, people who maybe didn't even have gardening skills but wanted to lend it from an artistic perspective. Sometimes those sorts of interactions will really sort of help transform your ideas. So again, weaving that web, building strong and active partnerships beyond just sort of your typical farm to school players is really, really important. And some of that will go into play as it relates to just sort of being very communicative about the work that you're doing. I'm sure many of us sort of do that, whether we're in sort of meetings or other partnerships sort of adjacent to farm to school, but not farm to school. You'll find that a lot of those folks have similar values, similar goals, and you can sort of bring them into sort of the farm to school planning just by just being sort of open and honest and talking about the things that you're trying to achieve. Like I mentioned before, people are genuinely very helpful. And I think once you start talking about kids and food and schools, you really start to pique some interest. So be communicative about the work that you're doing. And I think that's where you'll find some of those sort of unlikely partners. So engaging key stakeholders, of course, we think about farmers as it relates to that. When engaging farmers, it's really important to consider what their specific needs are. So thinking about things like their crop calendars, the predictability of demand. Farmers spend so much time way in advance of the snap peas ending up in the car at the trunk of the car and getting that grown and processed and sort of to the school doors. So understanding that we need to communicate with farmers well in advance so that they'll be so that they know that you'll be ready to buy what they have after it's grown. Fair pricing for the hard work of the farmers and how it simplifies the process for them. The farmers are often busy and sometimes hard to reach, especially in times of year like this. So it's really important then when we're communicating and pulling farmers into farm to school programs that we're understanding their schedules and that we're taking advantage of communication that's clear and efficient. Because they have very few hours in the day right now. So just some tips as it relates to dealing with farmers. The other thing that's important too is when you're working with farmers is to share with them how schools can be good partners for them. It's not just about buying produce, although of course it's very important, vegetables. It's about being a consistent market, offering community goodwill, and even providing educational opportunities for their kids or in the community to see where food comes from, and helps further sort of a genuine relationship with the farming community. So again, I think it's important to build that collaboration, be efficient, bring them into the fold, but then understand sort of the constraints that they're under as it relates to their own sort of work and livelihood. But sometimes when you get them away from the farm and you start having some of these conversations, sometimes off season, is when you can really start to see some of those relationships thrive. So I'll tell you a quick story about in our market in Northeast Indiana, which sort of led to some of these pictures. We have a strong partner out in North Manchester, Hawkins Family Farm. And they have a strong relationship with our Northeast Indiana local farm to school team, consisting of representatives of FarmWise, Becky, Parkview, and there's the sort of a constant communication loop and interaction there, which is great. And we learned that Hawkins had like 100 pounds of snap beans that they needed to get rid of. And they were eager and open to trying to identify a school resource that could potentially use those. As I'm sure you guys can appreciate, schools aren't in session right now, right? Well, several phone calls later, traction, we did identify Michelle Schnelker, who is our liaison for our Northeast Indiana Farm to School team. She's one of our leaders. She works for Parkview. Becky made some connections, and they were able to get those beans inside of a week to some summer school providers and get those vegetables in the hands of kids eating them, which was just great. So had it not been for the relationship, the trust, and just sort of that communication and efficiency, that might not have happened. And it really gives a strong testament to, to helping farmers, right? When they've got some excess, paying them a good market price, and then getting that food in the hands of kids. So that was a really recent success story that I was really happy to see. So then next, engaging key stakeholders for schools. I know we've got some schools on the phone already, but when we start talking about who in schools are stakeholders and who we might want to invite into the conversations as it relates to our farm to school strategies, obviously we think of food service, we think of teachers, we think of administration, we think of school health providers, nurses. Again, for schools, you want to make sure that you're speaking their language, like we did with like we talked about with farmers and their language as it relates to crop calendars. Some of the things that are important for schools are making sure that we're talking about things like student outcomes, wellness policies. Most schools have some sort of a wellness strategy, right? How can we leverage a farm to school initiative to support that wellness policy? How can we use farm to school to enhance some of their standard curriculum and bring in things like agriculture, healthy eating, things like that? So again, it's just important to know your audience, to understand the stakeholders that you're working with, and just try to tailor your message so that it's meaningful for them. And then it's not just about buying produce. It's about it's about making sure that the programs are tailored to the specific contexts and the student populations. Of course, that's sort of critical to get the buy-in from the start. So, okay. So I'm not going to dwell too much on school because we've got so many school folks here. I'm sure you can teach us some things in the chat, which I would appreciate. But the other thing I just wanted to mention, and maybe this is a little bit under the guise of unlikely sort of partners, don't forget about broader community stakeholders. And many of you might have strong relationships or programs where you've already tapped into some of these. And if you've got any strategies on how to sort of do that, I encourage you to sort of share that in the chat. But some of the broader community stakeholders that are important to engage, that can be not only advocates, but potential funders and things like that are, there's parents, of course, PTAs, PTOs, whichever you call it, local government officials, health systems. Like I said, in our market, our health system is a strong partner, and their community wellness teams are very proactive and engaged in farm to school. So don't forget about them as strong partner resources. Also, if you've got health systems that are not-for-profit status, part of their business strategy is that they need to give back to the community, and farm to school is a really great way for them to be able to do that. So developing those relationships and beginning those conversations to kind of plant seed for how farm to school can be help them as far as some of their community wellness strategies and community engagement can be really, really helpful. Of course, nonprofits, we're a nonprofit, we're actively engaged in on-school local businesses. But for those parties and those stakeholders, it's really important to highlight what's in it for them, right? It could be community health improvements. It could be local economic development. It could be youth engagement. It could be brand visibility. I think that's one that's maybe not underscored enough, is that for especially forward-thinking businesses who are very much interested in their brand and how it's perceived online, farm to school can be a great way for them to be able to align their brand with a value-added sort of strategy. The other thing is identifying how farm to school can help fulfill those community or other businesses' organizational missions. So I think just sort of making those ties in can be really, really helpful. I think this is where storytelling becomes really important. So, understanding if you've got a success story that has helped or made a difference in your community, in your school, with your partners, figuring out a way to share that story and highlighting the aspects that are that could be important to the audience can really help sort of make some of these strategies resonate and get them thinking about how they can really become engaged and support some of your programs. So, so again, community and flexibility and stakeholders are really, really important. So we talked a lot about partners. So I figured I'd try to solicit some extra support from the chat here and see, um, is there any particular partner in your particular farm to school arrangement that you feel like is most crucial for your program success right now? And this could evolve over time, but just interested to hear sort of what you might be seeing um, in your regions and in your groups right now. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of seconds. So what type of partner do you feel is most crucial? Farmers, school staff, broader community groups?
Karen, there was also a question with one of those partners to engage with. I believe it was for the farmers.
Yeah,
I don't know if you want to save questions until the end, but the question
no.
was, can you talk about the payment process for the farmer? I think we talked about like fair, making sure that there was fair prices. Can you talk on that just a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, I think that as far as payment for the farmer, I guess what I wanted to make sure was communicated was um, so it's not uncommon for farmers to be solicited and to, hey, provide us a donation for our school, or are you willing to give us these crops for free to be able to provide an opportunity to our students? And I think some farmers might be willing to do that. But I think we need to recognize that they're a business and understanding what the market price might be for the products that are sort of in scope for whatever your ask is, to recognize what that is. Some, like I said, we'll give an in-kind donation and that's okay, but we want to make sure that we're building ideally a market channel for those farmers to be able to sell product on a consistent basis. So, all schools have different sort of guidelines on invoicing and how that whole process works. So I'm not an expert on that. But what I will say is from a farmer perspective, I think making sure that we are paying a fair price for their product, considering everything they put into it, sort of bring it to market, and providing consistent market channel for them. I think that that's sort of the what's in it for them. I just would hate for us to sort of continually lean on donations and sort of goodwill. They're running a business too, and if they're successful, these programs can grow, right? So that's sort of my footnote on that. I don't know that I necessarily answered the question because it is going to vary from school to school, but I certainly want to make sure that we're leveraging fair market price as it relates to the farmers that we work with and offering them a good channel going forward. Does that help? I hope. But if you're in a particular school, I would say definitely talk to your accounting and finance team about what invoicing needs to look like, budgets, and all that other kind of stuff. I know that it might be a situation where you need to rely on an outside funder, right? I mean, there's been scenarios where whether there's subsidy opportunities for a fundraiser or a funder to provide some of the additional funds needed to be able to provide a local product at a school, right? So the school might have a budget. Let's say the budget is $500. The school might be willing and able and authorized to spend $500 on something, but for us to be able to get that product locally, it might cost us $800. Um, there might be an opportunity to identify a funder to be able to offset that extra 300. That way, you're actually fulfilling the goal of paying the farmer a fair market price, engaging a partner in sort of a goodwill community activity, but then also working within the confines of the school budget. So that's where you got to kind of get a little bit creative. And I know I didn't. I think that as it relates to fundraising and things like that, having those ideas sort of ready to go are really important, because I think that if you asked a business, and I know times are tight, but if you asked a business about could a $300 investment provide, and tell the story about what it might mean for a school, many businesses likely would find that that's part of their value, a part of their, mission and their values, and would want to sort of be a part of that story. So get creative.
There was a
Uh,
follow-up to the question. I don't know if you want me to ask it now. Maybe it answered it. It was just a resource to help find that fair market
yeah.
price. You
Oh
answered
yeah.
that question.
Yeah. We can work on seeing that there's some resources that we can provide as it relates to that for sure. Yep.
All right, thank you.
because it's going to change. Okay, so back to the chat question. Did we get any feedback on what's, so farmers are most important, local community development? Great. Parents? Excellent. Excellent. So yeah, and I think you might find that your most crucial partner could change over time, right? So I think that constant evaluation of where you stand, where are the strengths within your team, where is there a gap, and identifying sort of resources to support that, I think can go sort of a long way. So. Okay, so just as far as best practices and tips as it relates to engaging key stakeholders, whether it's farmers, schools, or community, things like that, it's really important to make sure that we are, remember what are the needs of your partner, what are their capacities, they might change over time. How can you speak in languages that is responsive and adaptive to them as it relates to long-term success? Um, as it relates to best practices, though, and it sort of was part of my story with the snappies, is communication. You can't underscore communication. And the other thing I'll mention as it relates to communication is that once you've established strong communication, consistent communication, and efficiency, that's what leads to trust, right? And that's what will help. And the trust is what will lead you to a strong relationship that will allow you to manage through the challenges, right? And the unexpected issues. So it's definitely a cycle, but you want to make sure that you're being responsive, that you are adaptive and sort of flexible as it relates to the folks that you're working with. Checking in regularly. If it's not somebody that's part of sort of your core team and your core meetings, just making sure that you're touching base with those stakeholders and providing updates and feedback is really critical. It'll also make sure that you'll have open dialogue so that when those invariable sort of challenges arise, you'll be able to sort of navigate through those. The other thing I want to mention, just as it relates to best practices and tips, and I could have a whole other thing on sort of meeting efficiency, but I think one of the things we need to be very cognizant of when we've got collaborative teams, multidisciplinary teams, is just making sure that the engagement that you have with them is structured um, and um, and communicated and efficient. So, I think there can be times in some of these meetings for sort of fellowship and chat and all those good things and sort of building relationships. But what I've found is that people want to know that their time is respected, and people want to know what to expect. They want to know what their job is. So as much as we can be efficient as it relates to whether it's individual communication or meetings, I think that's really important. So for me, I mean, one of the things I always think about is in advance of any interaction, like what's my goal? If I can come away from this interaction with, this one thing or maybe this one extra thing, like that's a success for me and for them. And sometimes that's offering something to them as well. So again, just focusing on action, focusing on commitment and communication will really help build that long-term trust so that when you've got 100 pounds of snap peas, you're trusting that your partner is going to get into the school and sort of be able to tell that story. So regular check-ins are important. And then, like I said, navigating the bumps. So, you've got a plan, you're building partnerships, but as we know, there will be bumps in the road. So, it's about proactively addressing those, again, through trust and communication over time, and ultimately, hopefully not being surprised by them. So there's going to be logistical challenges. Some of the things we talk about here, seasonality, transportation, you need to plan around harvests, you need to consider, existing food hubs and figure out refrigeration needs and nail down delivery schedule. I mean, all of these things, right? There's food safety challenges. We want to make sure that we're implementing best practices, having clear communication with farmers as it relates to, school food safety regulations. I think that the other thing that is important to communicate is budget constraints. So this is a big one for many of us. Some grant opportunities have dried up or become delayed. There are still grant opportunities available, maybe not as much with the federal government, or maybe those are becoming a little bit more difficult to obtain. But there are opportunities to look at local foundations, corporate sponsorships. It's really important to try to get creative right now as it relates to fundraising. Your PTA events can be something, community sales, donor appeals. I think the thing that's important to focus on, though, as it relates to budget constraints and funding ideas, is focusing on the value of local food. So, the freshness, the educational engagement as it relates to farm to school, even more so than just the initial cost, to be able to sort of share that in a way that it's shown as an investment and not just an expense. So, one of the things that I'll point out just real quick is local governments and municipalities and chambers and things like that are becoming more engaged as it relates to local food. I was actually on a webinar just yesterday that was really geared towards people involved in the local food economy. So like I said, chambers, economic development folks, government leaders, and sharing stories about how local food, and I would argue farm to school, can really help them, not just with their brand and their mission, but also in sustaining their local economy. So those are connections. Again, unlikely partners. People might not think economic development is going to be their farm to school partner, but there is some real momentum around local economies and local food that I think can help us navigate some of these funding challenges. So don't be afraid to engage some of those folks, especially if they have kids in school or what have you. They're real sort of focused partners. So, and then last, like I said, another common hurdle, like I said, is communication breakdowns. To prevent things like this, you're going to want to establish clear communication channels from the outside. Maybe you've got shared online documents, maybe you've got regular dedicated meetings, you've got those scheduled check-ins on the books for all your key stakeholders, not just the ones that you work with every day, but ones that maybe are on the periphery that you need to touch base with every month or every other month. It's really important to make sure that when you're having these conversations with folks that you're practicing things like active listening, addressing their concerns promptly. Don't let sort of small misunderstandings fester. Make sure that you tackle any issues head on. I think people appreciate transparency and they appreciate open dialogue. And again, those are the things that will help you build that trust. So last, we're getting towards the end here. Last is we're going to talk a little bit about measuring your impact. So proving your impact, why measure it? Really, it's because it proves your worth to stakeholders, to those funders that we've talked about, to the community. It shows them that not just what you're doing, but how you're doing is actually working and how it's worth them investing in. So measuring also helps you continuously improve and to make adjustments to your program. So it'll help you determine, what's working, what's not, and ultimately it'll help demonstrate tangible success and help you secure future support, human support, resources, but also funding support. So, okay. Proving your value. So, and then last, when it comes to metrics are really important. And sometimes this is where people get tripped up. But my advice to folks on metrics is to keep it simple. Start simple. Don't feel like you need to track everything all at once. So for example, if you've got, for procurement, you could track, the dollar value or the percentage of local food purchased, right? You could look at the number of local farms that you're engaging. Are there opportunities to increase that or tweak those numbers and build goals in there and sort of be able to have some metrics to report on from that perspective. As it relates to education, think about things like the number of student participants in lessons. If you've got garden activities, how many people are participating in those, the types of lessons delivered, any reported changes in student food preferences, knowledge, or consumption. Don't underestimate the opportunity to collect quantitative data there. But like I said, as far as the tip goes, start small if you can just choose like 1 to 3 metrics to start with, track them consistently, report out on those results, and then that'll give you some momentum to be able to share your success using both the data, which is important, and then the stories, which you talked about, like the storytelling. So, like I said, these things will bring these numbers to life and then really make them resonate with the audience. So, wrapping up, some of the key takeaways for the group, as far as to build your farm to school program. Number one, plan, have that clear, adaptable blueprint, partner, build strong and flexible partnerships, think outside sort of your circle and who those unlikely partners might be. Persevere, be proactive to sort of address those challenges that will inevitably come up. And then prove, right? We need to measure and share your impact. So the last thing I want to just, and we'll have some notes to share afterwards, but there are folks on the phone and folks across the state that are tremendous resources as it relates to farm to school, even just reading, connecting, newsletters, all of those things. So of course, we've got our Indiana Grown for Schools team. The FarmWise team is wonderful. I'm so excited about the work that they're doing. So if you're not partnering with your local FarmWise value chain coordinator, please do. There are also broader nationwide programs that can provide some good data for you to use in sort of storytelling or building the case or deciding where you want to, what kind of goals you want to put in place for your farm to school program. Those come through the USDA farm to school program. They've got grants and resources available. And I've also found the National Farm to School Network is great in having one-pagers, other sort of infographics and things like that can be really helpful and give you something to sort of engage your network and your stakeholders with and ideas to help build and develop your plan. So I'll ask you all to think about one step, one action, one goal that you're going to take for your farm to school program, whether it's this week, this month, this summer. I know many of you mentioned in the chat in the beginning that you're just starting out. So hopefully we haven't overwhelmed you sort of with a lot of details, but hopefully we've inspired you to sort of think of one thing that you want to do. So if you want to pop that in the chat, I'm interested to see your feedback on maybe one small commitment you can do. For us, we've got one of our meetings coming up next week. One of the things, not next week, but in the next month. So I'm sort of already considering how we can put some of these things to practice and how we can try to navigate some of these challenges, specifically as it relates to funding. So I've got some ideas and some things that we're putting down on how we're gonna solve some of our funding challenges to school program. So that's one of the things I'm going to be working on. That's all I have. I don't know
Wonderful.
if
Thank you, Karen. If there's any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat as we have just a couple minutes that we still have Karen on the line. Thank you again for joining us today. And thank you, Karen, for your time and effort that you put into creating this presentation for us.
No, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to, talk with folks that are in the same boat as me. We're all learning and sort of growing together. I encourage you to connect with those networks, other folks locally, get inspired by each other. There's a lot of great work happening. And I know sometimes it's easy to just focus on, your current program, your current challenges. But sometimes, getting together and getting inspiration from each other can help sort of give us that extra motivation to keep it going and to see it grow. So I thank everybody for showing up today and for being a part of the conversation.
Wonderful. And if you have any additional questions after the call, this meeting was recorded. And as Karen mentioned, we'll send out some resources with the recording as a follow-up. But Karen's information is listed here as well as mine, and I can connect you with some of the FarmWise team. I can connect you with our other Farm to School team members within the Indiana Grown for Schools network. So thank you again for being here today. We truly appreciate the time that you gave up to learn a little bit more about building your farm to school blueprint. Thank you. Have a great rest of the day.